Good evening to all. On behalf of CNSCA and our event associate, the Federation of Telangana Chambers of Commerce and Industry, I'm privileged to welcome all the participants for today's study series. Life arose from oceans. The ocean is vast and covers 140 million square miles. The ocean has always been an important source of food for the life it helped generate. And from earliest recorded history, it has also served trade and commerce, adventure and discovery. It has separated and brought people together. The ocean has long been subjected to the freedom of the seas doctrine, a principle put forth in the 17th century, essentially limiting national rights and jurisdiction over the oceans to a narrow sea belt surrounding a nation's coastline. The rest of the seas were declared free for all and belonged to none. While this situation lasted into the 20th century, by mid-century there was an impetus to extend national claim over offshore resources. The United Nations is working to ensure the peaceful, cooperative, legally defined uses of seas and oceans for the individual and common benefit of the humankind. UNCLOS has resolved several important issues relating to ocean usage and sovereignty. The Admiralty law is an area of development, and it plays an inevitable role in protecting the citizen as well as ensuring that no organization or individual violates the law of the sea. Arbitration in maritime industry is widely practiced as compared to the litigation, which involves more time and cost. Maritime arbitration dates as back as to the time of Lex Mercatoria, but it gained popularity in the recent time due to the global booming in international trade and commerce. Shipping industry has gained a lot of importance in the present era because it caters the demand of both the passengers and freight market. The role of arbitration generally arises when there is a dispute between two parties on the terms contained in the contract between them, and only if they don't agree to mediate between them. India has a long-standing history in dealing with the sea and has had a distinguished tradition for several years with trade and commerce, both within the region and beyond its territorial borders. India's maritime history dates back to 3rd millennium BC, and since then, many ships have sailed from India and to India. The customs and regulation concerning sea and maritime activities have been in the existence since time immemorial. Before independence, the law relating to maritime laws in India were governed under the British government. Under the Colonial Court of Admiralty Act 1890, the High Court of Bombay, Madras and Calcutta were the only judicial authorities competent to deal with the matters relating to Admiralty. The other courts of justice were restricted from dealing with the issues concerning the Admiralty. Under the Admiralty Court Act 1861, the three presidency courts were vested with the same powers as that of the High Court of England. In India, the Admiralty Jurisdiction and Settlement Maritime Claims Act 2017 was enacted on 9th August 2017 to consolidate the laws relating to Admiralty. The Act implemented repeals all the outdated provisions relating to Admiralty. Now the scope of Admiralty jurisdiction has been widened, and apart from the presidency courts, the jurisdiction to deal with the Admiralty matters also vests with High Court of Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Orissa, and Kerala. We have with us today an immensely learned person, a person of conspicuous ability, and a skillful practitioner in maritime dispute, Mr. M. Jagannath. He is an accomplished speaker and will enliven the topic Maritime Dispute, Win the Battle and the War. May I request a chairperson to introduce today's speaker. Saravanan, over to you.
Thank you, Ashok, and thank you, Mr. Anand. Good evening, and my warm greetings to one and all. Today's resource person on the topic is Mr. M. Jagannath. Mr. Jagannath has completed law in University of London in the year 2009, obtained graduate certificate in international arbitration from National University of Singapore in the year 2011, and pursued master degree in maritime law in University of London in the year 2012. Mr. Jagannath held the position as chairman, membership committee of Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. Mr. Jagannath has more than 25 years of experience in various facets of shipping and international trade. He is the founder of NAU Private Limited, a marine claims consultancy and correspondent firm in Singapore involved in handling, adjusting various marine-related claims. Jagannath is an arbitrator and mediator and is listed as a panel arbitrator at various institutions, including the Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration, China Maritime Arbitration Commission, Emirates Maritime Arbitration Center, Asian International Arbitration Center, and the Indian Council of Arbitration. He is a court-appointed volunteer mediator at Singapore State Courts. Jagannath is an adjunct at Singapore Management University and is involved, along with other colleagues of the Singapore branch of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, in the delivery of the shipping business course to the undergraduate students. Mr. Jagannath frequently lectures on shipping, marine insurance at various forums. On behalf of CNICA and all the participants, I welcome Mr. Jagannath, and I request Mr. Jagannath to take the digital dais to deliver this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the warm words. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes.
It is indeed, thank you very much. I must thank CNICA for inviting me to speak at this webinar. Before I start, some disclaimers. I have been involved in various maritime and insurance related disputes, and my talk is based on my experience. Should any of the participants face any issues, and I would recommend that it would always be best to seek advice from our counsel, because they would be the best parties to advise how it is to go. This talk is of general nature. I am not a lawyer, although I've studied law. I'm a practitioner, so I speak from the perspective of a practitioner, which is a bit different in the sense that we look at how the practice is dealt. At the outset, I must also mention that there is no one way to solve an issue. There are many ways, and one should always be willing to consider what is best in the circumstances. With that, now let me go to the presentation proper. Let me just try and get my slides on. 1 second, if you... you would have to give me permission to share my screen.
You can try now, sir. It is permitted. Permitted.
Okay. Okay. Litigation, and contrast this with the different forms of alternative dispute resolution, sometimes also known as appropriate dispute resolution. I will only focus on two of the alternative dispute resolution methods, which is mediation and arbitration. There are other forms of dispute resolution which I will not take at this forum. I will then touch upon the advantages and disadvantages of each of these: litigation, arbitration, and mediation. In the international context for maritime disputes. And then, like I said, I'm a practitioner as far as maritime disputes is concerned or international trade is concerned. So I'll only restrict myself on this aspect. And then touch on it, why it is important to understand that if you are a party involved in a dispute, to know what you want, or if you are if you're a counsel or if you're a lawyer assisting a client, to understand what the party wants or what the clients want. Does the client want to fight or resolve the issue? And in which case you should choose a dispute resolution method or a combination of the various forms of dispute resolution methods to find the perfect fit. So this is what, my outline is. This is what I will try to focus on. And then I would be happy to take questions as they arise. Litigation can be defined as a process of taking a case to the court so that a judgment can be provided to the dispute at hand. In the international context, some issues may arise in litigation, such as jurisdiction. Parties might, try and say that that court doesn't have the jurisdiction to hear a case. There may be also forum shopping, because by definition, we are talking about international, disputes. parties would prefer to deal with a dispute in a forum which they are comfortable, and you may have multiple proceedings. Some parties will like to initiate proceedings in their home forum for home advantage. So there are issues which comes in international context. The next question is the applicable law to the dispute. If the contract does provide for a law of the contract, well, you could argue in the court where you're going that, listen, this is the law of the contract and the court should actually hear on this basis. But sometimes some courts are not willing to consider other laws, so to say, or other jurisdictional issues, and they will probably deal it on the basis how they deal normally in their own courts. So this is another complexity you need to consider when you're dealing with international disputes in different forums. There are procedural complexities, then the issues related to enforcement of court decision. And obviously there would also be, issues of increased costs due to the international context. If you're having a party to deal with a different jurisdiction, you would need to engage a lawyer from that jurisdiction, and perhaps you may also engage a lawyer from your own jurisdiction. If you want to present evidence in that place, you would need to fly people there. So these are increased costs which arise. So when you talk about litigation, these are the issues you need to look. Contrast this with mediation. Mediation is a process in which parties discuss their disputes using the assistance of a trained, impartial third person or persons, the mediator, and who facilitates the parties in reaching a resolution of the disputes. Some parties say, oh, this is negotiation. The difference between negotiation and mediation is when you negotiate, you don't have a neutral third party. So when you negotiate looking from your perspective. And sometimes it becomes difficult because each party have their own perspective. There may be no common ground. But when you use a trained third party impartial, he is trying to facilitate it. He's trying to assist parties so that you can look at the same dispute with different eyes. Courts in many jurisdictions have realized that it is in the best interest of parties to try and find a solution. And sometimes they mandate, at least in Singapore, they mandate that prior to any hearings, parties go for an ADR process. And only when this is ticked or when this process is completed, the hearing continues. So sometimes parties do not come with open hands for mediation. They just do it. They just mediate for the simple reason they need to do the tick box so that they can go for the hearing. This is sad, or this is often a lost opportunity. So, because a mediation can often help parties to achieve what they want, provided parties have faith in the process, actively participate, and look at the dispute from both the perspective, their own perspective, the opponent's perspective. You look at it from four eyes, so to say. Why do I say this? All of us have the same eyes. We look at it, but we always have some subtle differences. I wear a spectacle. So only when I wear a spectacle can I see clearly. Some of us might be colorblind. So you're seeing the same thing, but you may have a different perspective. Everything is correct, so to say. The other example I could perhaps give is this COVID pandemic. You could, in common law countries, you have the issue of force majeure. It is a creature of the contract. And if you want to deny or defend a claim, you could defend it on the basis of force majeure, provided the contract provides for a force majeure clause. But if you look in civil law countries, force majeure is available as of right. You do not need to put it in a contract. And therefore, something like COVID arguably would entitle a party from a civil law jurisdiction to say, listen, this is the defense as of right, and I should be entitled to it. Even if the contract provides for a law of the contract, which provides for a common law jurisdiction, so to say, that means you need to have a contractual incorporation of a force majeure clause. When you try to enforce it in a civil law jurisdiction, it may still be an issue because, parties may defend or deny it on the basis of public policy defense. So what I'm trying to say is, we see the same thing, the facts are the same, but the way we have been brought up there would be differences. And so we must, realize that we need to try and find a solution along with the differences. What about arbitration? It's a private process where parties, when they have a dispute, agree that one or several individuals can hear the matter and make a decision on the dispute. It is different from mediation, as arbitrators have a duty to publish an award. They need to give a decision. In the olden days, there was a feeling that they could split the difference. I don't think that is true insofar as the international context is concerned. They need to hear the dispute. They need to take a decision depending on the facts and the evidence which has been presented. And they have to, instead of, thinking, okay, let's try and find a difference. That's not this thing. You need to give an award or a decision insofar what happens also in litigation. Originally, arbitration was market justice, in the sense that you go to someone in the market and the market people, look at the facts, they look at the evidence, and they try to give a decision which is in keeping with the line of the trade, so to say. However, nowadays it has become complicated, leading to increased costs and delays. Arbitration is basically parties' choice, and they can contractually provide for abridged procedures to deal with such issues related to costs and delays by using specific procedures.
Smart Desk. We have made a note of your request, and our dealer shall contact you back shortly.
Sorry, I heard something. So can you all hear me loud and clear?
Sorry, there was some, I don't know how it has come. Anyway, now it's clear, sir. You can proceed.
Okay. So when you can also have abridged procedures like the small claims procedure, which is available both under LMAA, London Maritime Arbitrators Association, or the Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration rules, which allows for, say, one arbitrator, no right of appeal, abridged procedures, so that you have fixed timelines, fixed number of words in your submissions. And the costs also, the costs are also capped at a certain figure. So there is abridged version which is available. So if you want to try and reduce these complexities as far as the cost and time, it's quite possible. So when you compare all these three, you need to look at the time. Arbitration and mediation can provide a speedier resolution than proceedings in court. Arbitration has a limited right of, in most of the jurisdictions, there is no right of appeal on a point of law or a point of evidence, so to say. It eliminates an appeal process. But if you have an appeal process which is available in the courts, that can delay the finality of the adjudication process which is there. In the case of mediation, if a settlement agreement is reached in some jurisdictions, this can be enforced without the need to initiate a separate action. In this regard, I'm sure you all are aware that the Singapore Mediation Convention has come into force, with 5 countries depositing the instruments of ratification. Since there are only 5 countries which have given the signature, so to say, I think more needs to be done to get it recognized. You'll appreciate that 53 countries have signed this convention. Alternatively, if mediation is conducted in tandem with arbitration, then the same finality can be achieved, as is the case for arbitration. There is an ARB protocol which is bandied by SIAC and ACMA. You can start an arbitration when you have a dispute, and then you can ask the arbitrator to stay proceedings. Then you go and mediate. And when you have a mediation agreement, you can go back to the arbitrator, request for a consent award, and then it will fulfill the requirements as an award for enforcement. So you have the same this thing. So as and when the Singapore Mediation Convention comes into wide use, I think you need to look at ways and means where you can actually enforce the mediation agreement in the international context, without going into more complicated ways, by trying to combine with other forms of, let's say, arbitration, to try and get an award which can be easily enforced. With respect to flexibility, court litigation is largely controlled by statutory and procedural rules. In the case of arbitration and mediation, the procedures on the basis of rules provided under the arbitration and mediation. Additionally, with mutual agreement, parties have the opportunity to establish rules and limits for exchange of information, documents, together with the manner the process will be conducted. So it's quite possible that you could make it as flexible as possible as far as ADR is concerned. Mediation is often the least costly, followed by arbitration, primarily due to the compressed schedule for the completion of discovery and trial. In court litigation, significant expenses are devoted to pre-trial discovery processes such as written interrogatories and deposition of witnesses. However, the same issues of discovery process is also prevalent in arbitration, and this has also led to an increase in costs. The soundness of any adjudication is largely dependent upon the quality of the arbitrator and the judge. In the arbitration and mediation process, the parties choose the arbitrator and mediator. Any pre-hearing disputes between the parties are decided by the same arbitrator, who ultimately decides the case. In contrast, in many courts, no individual judge is specifically assigned to a case, and therefore it may be possible that multiple judges may be involved in dealing with the same case. The judge may also be assigned by the court without input from the parties. So therefore, you could probably take it that arbitration and mediation affords the parties the ability to select the arbitrator and mediator, whereas court litigation does not. In the case of expedites, arbitrators and mediators are selected from a pool of professionals and therefore may provide a greater level of expertise than a judge. Such persons should have a greater capability to comprehend the industry-related issues, especially shipping and international trades, and the related documents such as bills of lading, letter of indemnities, and so on, rather than most trial judges. Having said this, in some jurisdictions, judges also have specialized knowledge and are often used for large international trade disputes. So you might find that this is not necessarily true when you have a large dispute, but if you have a small or medium-sized dispute, you might find that you could probably choose a person who's much more well knowledgeable as far as the issues are concerned. If you talk about litigation, a judge's decisions are constrained by statutory and case law, and the conduct of trial is governed by established rules of evidence. In the case of arbitration, an arbitrator has considerable flexibility to consider any evidence he or she deems relevant and may issue an award based on perceptions of fairness or equity and not necessarily on the evidence or rules of law. Having said this, arbitrators are duty bound to follow the law of the contract such that they need to follow whatever is binding precedent. That is, judgments of the lower courts need not necessarily be, they're not bound by them, but would be persuasive in nature. In the case of higher courts, they would need to follow it because the law of the contract is for a specific jurisdiction. They need to give effect to the contract, so to say. In the case of mediation settlement agreement is basis the parties' agreement. It is decided by the parties themselves. So, the issue is with them and they can decide whether they want to do it or not. One of the issues with arbitration and mediation is mainly due to joinder. There may be other parties down the chain. In a shipping context, you may have a charter party, you may have a sub-charter party. If all parties do not have similar arbitration clause or a mediation clause, they cannot be compelled to join. So if there are additional parties who need to join, then you may have an issue. In court proceedings, all persons and entities can be joined, and this is obviously an advantage when you have multiple parties who do not have the same provisions. With respect to an arbitration, the award is final. The only way you could probably do it in most of the jurisdiction is set aside if there is some procedural irregularity. They have not been given equal opportunity to present. Whereas in the case of, if you go to a litigation, you generally have the right to appeal, and a losing party may therefore appeal on the process. So this is something which you need to look at it. The last point I want to touch is actually on win-win or win-lose. in both litigation and arbitration, wherever there is an adjudicatory process, one party has to win, one party has to lose on a specific issue. I'm aware that there may be multiple issues, in which case a party may win on some issues, may lose on some issues. There has to be a win-lose. So there is always a winner and loser, but in mediation, it is quite possible if parties are willing to work, and particularly when they have a mutual intent to work together in the future, it's quite possible that both parties get what they want. I will elaborate it on this a bit later. I thought I'd touch a bit about the experience which I had. When I was much younger, I did participate in a court mediation. The company where I was working had a dispute. Since I was green, I was very young, I was not given any specific, instruction to try and sort it out in mediation. I was told to attend just to the tick box, so to say. The mediator was very helpful, and the opponent parties did provide settlement options. However, it was not considered, and when it went to court, we did get a decision which I felt could have been avoided. We could have been done much better if we had gone for the mediation agreement, so to say. So my experience is always be willing to look at it from new eyes, not just look at it, oh, we just need to do the tick box. I was also involved in other dispute in which the claim was for more than $1 million. That's when I started my career in adjusting, in liability adjusting. And this was a claim in which a lot of containers of cars loaded in containers got damaged. There was a claim made by a Chinese party against an European party. The claim was in excess of $1 million. And obviously, when we looked at the contract, we looked at the defenses, we believed that the claim could be defended to a much lower figure. We did not agree to the claim, and the opponent party initiated action in the Chinese courts. The Chinese courts have a process that before they go for the final hearing or before they give a decision, they try to mediate between parties. And the court suggested a figure which was 1/10 of the claim amount. And we were happy to take the certainty, so to say, and we felt that the figure more well represented what we thought would be a liability, and we agreed to do it. So you need to look at how the changes are, how to work around with this thing and try to deal with it. I've also been involved in arbitration, both as an arbitrator and also as a party appointed representative to deal with disputes. In one of the disputes I was involved, the opponent parties did not participate. What generally happens if you have a small or medium-sized dispute, opponents, they don't cooperate. It may well be that due to increased costs, the other party, says, okay, there's not worth pursuing. Let's drop it. Let's do a drop hands and move on. In this case, my clients wanted to pursue for the full amount. Fortunately, the contract had a small claims procedure of a CMA. So we were able to, approach the appointment authority for also appointment of a single arbitrator. Otherwise, you have 3 arbitrators. And then we went to the full hog. We paid the fees. We got an award. Before we went to the enforcement proceedings, and because it's an international arbitration, it was in a different jurisdiction, the opponent party paid the full award. I feel that if the party had cooperated and participated, even if it was an arbitration, the cost would have been much lesser because the complexity would have been reduced. Because there's a due process peronia in the sense that if the other party is not participating, you would send reminders after reminders. Otherwise, also because 2 parties are participating in the process, there is an opportunity to mediate or negotiate. So there is a mixed opportunity to try and reduce it. Moving on to litigation, invariably shipping contracts provide for arbitration. However, when there are no contracts, then one can, in some instances, find jurisdiction under admiralty law, say by arresting a vessel. A merry threat of arrest can often force the opponent parties to consider providing security with some form of dispute resolution process agreeable to both parties. Otherwise, the place where the arrest founds the jurisdiction, that place would deal with the dispute, so to say. If there is no provision in the contract for some dispute resolution process, I think it is unlikely they would provide for some form of dispute resolution process, including litigation. then you would need to consider some sort of trying to force that party to some jurisdiction where you can deal with the dispute. I think when you have a dispute, I think the most important is to ask these three questions: what, why, and how. What do you want? This is indeed a difficult question to answer, as very often the original parties who are involved, when I mean the original parties, you would probably having an employee, who's involved with other employee of a different party when the dispute comes. But when the dispute blossoms, the original employee is no longer involved. It goes to a lawyer, it goes to a counsel, or it goes to an external counsel, and the dispute can blossom bigger. It can snowball. Why do I say that? In the original dispute, the issue may be related to one small point, but once it has been looked by counsel or legally trained professionals, they would probably find, or they may probably find, other issues which a party is be entitled to. So, since the dispute blossoms, you may have issues. My point, what I'm trying to say, it's important as a first step to understand as to what you want, what the party want, what is the party, does the party want to win at all costs? Are they looking for some benefit? Or sometimes do they wish to avoid the dispute, given that they are unable to pay, or simply do not wish to pay? If a party is unable to pay, it will be, my view is that perhaps to say the other party, listen, I cannot pay. Even if you get an award or you can get a judgment, there is no money to pay. And sometimes the other party may just drop off or find a way to work together so that they can do it. With respect to why is the party looking to initiate action? Do they want to recover their rightful dues? No adverse publicity? I think you need to ask what, why, and how. How do they wish to achieve it? Litigation or ADR? Perhaps do this to force a compromise? Yes. It is important, in my view, to go through these questions as the dispute progresses. It is important to ask all throughout, not only at the beginning. It may be that the answers to these questions would change during the process, allowing flexibility to the parties to deal with the dispute. For instance, if there is an offer in the table, but was not considered earlier, but it can now be considered due to the stress, perhaps due to this COVID situation. Yes, now what is happening is when the dispute started, everything was going on fine. But now, due to the stress of COVID, you might say, listen, it's better to have something on the table instead of not doing it. So I think it is important to look at these three questions always at every time. Which leads me to the next question. What should I choose? This will obviously depend on the type of the dispute. Is there a provision on the contract for resolution of disputes? If yes, you are contractually bound to follow the process unless parties agree to vary it. The problem is, when you ask a party when a dispute arises, they would generally take tactical positions. They would look at what is best in their interest and not at dealing with the dispute. So you must be aware of this. Yes. Mediation is certainly helpful if parties are involved in an ongoing relationship. Mediation is a consensual process and can often resolve disputes with the minimum of cost and time, provided parties are willing to participate. Parties can mediate as soon as possible, even if legal proceedings have been initiated. Early mediations can sometimes be difficult because parties have different opinions about the law and facts and judge or arbitrator outcomes. The outcome factor is usually determined by internal investigation, and that's where you have jaded eyes. You look at it from your own perspective and with the prediction input from your lawyers. Invariably, only when the dispute is full-blown will one know of the merits of their case, as evidence may then be available at that point of time. Most parties should therefore consider mediation to get rid of a dispute as soon as possible. In addition, a mediation settlement gives a party more control of the outcome than the adversarial system. It allows also the preservation of desirable business relationships. In the sense, you can continue with your business instead of having some sort of a bad taste that you're fighting with someone and which might actually sour, you might not do business, or the other party will refuse to continue to do business. It could also reduce both internal and external expenses. The question is how to reach a settlement when the other party shows no interest in backing off from a position that has already been rejected by their opponents. Practically speaking, only a judge can force parties to mediate, and that may be done when the legal process has been initiated and documents have been exchanged, and by which time considerable expenses have already been incurred. Most arbitrators will also not bring up the subject of mediation and leave it to the parties to consider it by themselves. I just want to say both the SCMA rules and the LMA rules do provide that parties can, take a stay in the process to go for mediation. So it's parties' choice, so to say. If you have an issue of such when parties are not willing to move from their position, mediation can be delayed until after discovery is completed. Settling after expenditures for full discovery doesn't benefit as much as earlier, if you can do it much earlier before discovery, because costs will have been incurred. But in any event, if you reach a settlement, there will still be significant cost savings. So, I would suggest that, if you cannot do it at the beginning, at least do it once all the facts are in place, so you can at least go about it. So the next question you'd probably ask, what is the best time to start mediation? My view is any time is the best time. I could perhaps elaborate on it a bit later in the question and answers, because everyone has his own view on this. But I think if you are willing to look at it, please look at it each and every time as the opportunity arises. What about arbitration? When participating in an adversarial process, clients seldom have a full understanding of the basis of the adversary's position until discovery and motion practice is complete. Lawyers may often pursue a leave no stone unturned approach to the process in order to fulfill their duty to their clients. In this situation, clients can control costs, say by negotiating rates or capping costs, but this may in turn interfere with the quality of service the client receives. So there is no right answer or wrong answer. Generally, for shipping and international trade disputes, arbitration is preferred, and the reason is because of New York Convention. More than 155 states have ratified it. So if you get an international arbitration award, it can be easily enforced, subject to two differences, Article 5.1 and 5.2, which is for incapacity, invalid agreement, procedural unfairness, contrary to public policy, etc. An arbitration, the time span involved in an arbitration can be more predictable as lawyers, both the lawyers or the lawyers involved can cooperate to limit the time involved in discovery and the hearings. So it's quite possible that, because in international trade and shipping, you look at arbitration, you could try and expedite the process, work together, enforcement becomes much more easier vis-a-vis a court process, a litigation process, because you may have enforcement issues when you want to do it. In respect to litigation, will depend on whether you use other modes of dispute resolution. If you do not have, then obviously you need to look at litigation. I think it is important to look at a combination. So if you want to mediate, it's quite possible the other party does not want to mediate. You may need to initiate litigation or arbitration to force the other party to deal with your dispute. And you can say, listen, I'm happy to come and mediate if it's possible. I think you need to work, and sometimes there might be a solution that's one approach is enough, but sometimes you need to look at combinations to get what you want. So the focus, like I said, is what, why, and how is very important. What is it I want? Why do I want it? How do I plan to achieve it? So you need to look at from that perspective. The way you could probably do it is split the dispute into agreements and disagreements. By doing this, one can reduce the disputes both in complexity and quantum, and which would go a long way to reach a settlement. I did mention that all of us see the same things, but we view it differently. I did touch on force majeure, so I will not take on that. In some jurisdictions, you do have the issue of costs. In common law countries, generally what happens is costs follow the event. You are entitled to costs if you're the winning party. In civil law jurisdiction places, you may not be entitled to costs, or in some jurisdictions, even if cost is available, it is very minimal. It is not a significant advantage, so to say, to get the cost. So you need to look at, one truth or many truth. We all see it differently. How do I deal with it? Look at the systems of law. We are all in different countries. We all have the same blood, but we view it differently. We need to be aware that the world is unique. We need to work it together as a way to deal with it. There would be home advantage if you deal with a system where you're involved, and you need to be aware. Listen, if you're going to fight in a home, it's just like a cricket match. I think the cricket match is going to start tomorrow. I am not a follower of cricket, but I think if you're going to play in front of your home ground, the home team has an advantage, perhaps psychological, so be it. So the same way as in disputes, if you're going to the home court, so to say, psychologically the home team would have an advantage. It might not be true, but there would maybe a psychological advantage. So you have a home advantage. The other thing is you would know which is the lawyer or which is the counsel who's dealing with such. So there are advantages if you have an home advantage. So you need to look at these things. So what do you need to consider? First thing is, when you fight, look at your chances of success. You may be right, you see it from your perspective, but you must be jaded that when it goes in front of a court or when it goes in front of an arbitrator, depending on the time span, things might change. Yes. So you need to look at what are the chances of success. I am not a lawyer, but I think, a lawyer's duty is first to the court if in litigation. Otherwise, a lawyer's duty is to advocate what is in the best interest of the client, including the commercial consideration. Perhaps the slow pace of law might be one of the factors to consider litigation as a tactical advantage when you want to defend or deny a claim. If you're in a jurisdiction in which the pace of law is very slow, you can easily say, okay, let's go ahead for litigation. But every action, in my view, has an equal and opposite reaction as far as trade is concerned. Costs of doing business would increase because parties will talk, parties will say, listen, when you have a claim, this party is not going to honor it. They would have some sort of an anti-selection. People will not willingly like to do business. Or they do it, they will add a sort of a premium. You could talk to traders, they'll probably tell you on this. From the commercial perspective, I would probably look at it from that perspective. But if you deal with a dispute, if you're dealing with it on an honorable way, I think even if you lose or if you win, there is a chance of success. People will look at it from a different perspective. So my suggestion is, I think one should look at all this. And if you think that a settlement is better than fighting, it is always best to recommend to a client, because what would then happen is the client would continue to do more business. He could give you more opportunities to a lawyer to try and deal with more claims. And there would be also more referrals saying that, listen, this is a commercial lawyer who understands how it is. So that's my view on this. You need to also look at the costs. In some jurisdictions, you can get the costs. In some jurisdictions, even if you get costs, it is minimal. Time, I know in some jurisdictions, I'm involved in some disputes in India, wherein we still have not got a date for the hearing. It's more than 1.5 years in a high court in Chandigarh. So time is a factor. And with this COVID process, we were discussing a bit earlier, things are getting delayed in the subordinate courts or the lower courts, so to say. So you might have more delays coming in the system. So you need to factor that. Business loss, including opportunity costs. If you have a dispute, you may not lose an opportunity to continue doing business with the party. So that's something you need to be aware of. And even if you win, what about enforcement? It's not so simple. If you try to get an enforcement, people will use every tactical advantage to try and defend it, deny it. So that is something you need to look at it. The last is recalcitrant opponent. You have an opponent, who doesn't want to deal with it. I think you need to take a position. Do you want to make an example or not? That's the only way I would look at it. But when you're doing business, you probably know, well, I'm dealing with a person who's going to deal with this, that's a risk you're taking. But otherwise, leaving that aspect, I think you need to factor that because, like I said, the international business community is not a very big community. People work together, they talk to each other. I think it's important to understand that no one size fits all. There are many ways to skin the cat, so to say. You need to look at it from a very pragmatic way to deal with it. It is always better to have a negotiated settlement. You can control the outcome. Yes, if you go for litigation or arbitration, even if you have a strong case, no lawyer will say, I will win the case. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm able to say this. It's very difficult to predict the outcome because there are factors which might not be there available. There might be 1 or 2% or 5% or 10% that the decision is the other way. Whereas if you're able to reach a negotiated settlement, either by negotiation or mediation or by a consent award, at least you can actually deal with it from that perspective. Fight only if necessary, absolutely necessary. If a party does not deal with it, you need to consider it. Do you want to fight, or you want to keep this money for a later day to fight? Yes. So, choose your battles wisely, and that too for the differences. Is the difference too small, too large? Look at the bigger picture. So if you really ask me, what I would probably look at is, I would probably look at what I want, how do I deal with it? And I'd probably say, listen, I need to find a game plan to get what I want. Sometimes I might concede the minor battle, so to say. I might not fight the battle because I think it is not worth fighting the battle because I'm keeping the war in consideration. I think, if I have time, I could perhaps talk about 1 or 2, disputes. I could probably touch on this thing. I'll touch on it. If you have a dispute, let's say about $250,000, a demurrage dispute, which is very common in a charter party contracts, wherein demurrage for those who are not involved in shipping is that you have time allowed for loading and discharge of a vessel. And if a charterer uses additional time than what is being provided in the contract, the owners are entitled to something known as a demurrage, which is basically liquidated damages. So you have a demurrage dispute in which owners are saying that we are entitled to a claim of 250,000 USD. Charterers dispute it. They say no, you're only entitled to 150,000. The contract between the owner and charterer provides for a LNA arbitration with a small claims provision for $100,000. There are many ways to deal with it. The charterers could say, okay, we are willing, we agree that there's a 150,000 which you need to pay. We are paying with the 150,000. Then the dispute reduces from 250 to 100,000, in which case the small claims, procedure would apply, which would make it much more easier to deal with the dispute. The other way to deal with it is you deny the claim and say, listen, you prove your claim, and you take it, and then what happens? The complexity increases. Because once you do the arbitration, you need to have 3 arbitrators instead of the 1 arbitrator. The cost would increase. So a commercial man would perhaps look at it, would perhaps say, listen, we do not have a dispute as far as 150,000 is concerned. The charter pays 150,000. We have a dispute of 100,000. Should the owners wish to proceed on arbitration, they can proceed on arbitration. When the arbitration is initiated, there is an opportunity for parties to talk, to negotiate, because there are costs involved. And perhaps before, submissions are made, both parties can come to an amicable settlement. If they are not able to come to an amicable settlement because both parties view in a different way, it's quite possible they say, listen, let us proceed with the arbitration. And the arbitrator gives his award. The advantage of doing this is you are trying to minimize your exposure. You are trying to get what you want, and both parties can continue working together. So I think, if you look at win the battle and lose the war is a general trend which people say, I think more important is win the war. So choose the battle which you want. And if you plan it properly, you can do that. With that, I thank you for listening to me patiently. I'm happy to take questions if you'd like to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a couple of questions on the board, chat board. One is from our institution. Our chairman has asked, what is the arbitration, which arbitration is familiar in Singapore, whether the ad hoc or the institutional arbitration?
See, in shipping, generally what happens is people prefer ad hoc because, in shipping contract, as far as cargo is concerned, you generally have strict time limits. The Hague or Hague-Visby rules provides for 1 year time bar. Contractually, if you have, the charter party provides for 6 years, but you might have shorter time durations provided under the contract. So what you need to do is first to try and, stop time from counting further. So shipping and international trade prefer ad hoc, so at least you can start arbitration, the time stops to count. If you go to an institutional arbitration, the problem with an institutional arbitration is you need to pay the first tranche of the fees based on the quantum of the claim. Yes. So if you have a claim of 1 million, you need to pay the fees on the quantum of the first tranche. You probably, whatever the percentage. And, I think most parties would have to put good money first. So invariably, shipping disputes, I think people prefer that, but if they don't, they can still go to institutional arbitration. There is no right way or wrong way. Both institutional and ad hoc are good in its own way. In Singapore, there are two main, bodies, so to say. One is the SIAC, Singapore International Arbitration Center, which follows an institutional model. I must also say that about 20 to 30% of the disputes are shipping and international trade. You also have another body known as Singapore Chamber of Maritime Arbitration, which is primarily focused on maritime disputes. That is ad hoc. I'm not making, but you have both of this. So it depends on what the parties want. And ultimately, the contract provides for a SIAC clause. You go to SIAC. If the contract provides for a SCMA clause, you go to SCMA. But before the dispute, parties can choose, talk to their counsel, and decide what is best, why they want to deal with it. Does it answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
One more question from Saravanan himself. He's asked, how long does it take for an maritime arbitration to get resolved in Singapore, even if it is hotly contested?
I think, generally arbitrators have a duty to finish the deal with the claim as soon as possible with minimum cost and to provide an award which is enforceable. I think from an arbitrator's perspective, these are the three things which I would probably look at. But arbitration is, also has something known as party autonomy. So if parties want to delay it, the arbitrator has no specific powers, which may be having powers, so to say, in the court, so to say. But if parties really want to try and deal with the dispute, it is not uncommon to have an award within 4 to 6 months. And, the average time would be a year or so, but it is not uncommon. It all depends on the parties. But if you choose the parties, when I say parties, they're including their counsel. If they want more time, and it is party autonomy, and then, if the other counsel also agrees, then arbitrator would generally, because of due process, allow extra time, so to say. But otherwise, I think that's that flexibility which you have in the court, where the court will say, listen, this is a day, I'm not going to give any extension. That flexibility is not so much available in arbitration. But yes, I think normal time, 1 year, is you could perhaps get a dispute and award within a year or so.
That's excellent. There are various comments on the chat box, all in appreciation to the entire session.
Thank you very much.
Yes, there are a lot of comments, and everyone has said it's really a good session. It's been very informative. And it was well focused and presented. Nice comments on the floor. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was a treat for us to know more about maritime arbitration and how it has been conducted in Singapore and how mediation and arbitrations have been conducted. And Mr. Jagannath had given us a clear view and of the process and the practice in the field. Thank you so much, sir. I also thank all the audience for being present and patiently hearing for the entire session. There are people who have come from various parts of the world at a very early morning time and have been, especially Mrs. Ecker has been there from the beginning and actively participating in the chat box. Thank you, madam. And thank you one and all for this session. And our next session will be on the 2nd of October. It will be on mediation. And that's Gandhi Jayanti, and we have chosen to have the session on mediation. So until then, we'll take leave. And pardon?
Restorative justice.
Yeah, it is on the restorative justice. Thanks, Anand, for correcting me. With that, we'll end this session. Thank you one and all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jagan
so
sir.
much, sir.
Thank you
Jagan.
so much for your time.